guys, it's M4J here, and welcome back to the M4J network here on OpenTTD. Today we are doing lots of building, lots of rebuilding, lots of signaling, and lots of training, because I decided, quite stupidly in hindsight, that I wanted to get all three Gardcity South blank franchises up and running. So that means we've got Gardcity Southern, Gardcity Southwestern, and Gardcity Southeastern. Now, Gardcity Southeastern technically had some trains running, because that's the service that runs between Gardcity, Tuningly, Plenborough, not Donborough, that's nowhere near, Drentbourne, Dendstone, and Lenway. I always forget Lenway. Citizens of Lenway, I'm so sorry, I always forget you exist. That's probably the biggest franchise of the three as well. It's actually the one I've left till last, which you'll see momentarily. Gardcity Southern is the one that runs between Gardcity St Mark and stations like Cadingbury Junction, Bunbourne Parkway, Munfingford Paragon, Queen City Junction, once that line is up and running, which it currently isn't. And it also runs little services here, there, and everywhere as well. So that's probably the smallest of the three. And then the one that I did first, which is the medium-sized one, and already gives you a sense of scale as to how big this operation actually is Gardcity Southwestern. And that is the franchise that runs between Gardcity St Mark and places like Charwood, Fort Flonwood Parkway, Fort Flonwood Central, Bunbourne Parkway, Bunbourne Town as well, but you can't terminate there, Munfingford Paragon, and there is also, I believe, a service that runs out to Cadingbury Junction as well. Excuse me, I'm a little bit bunged up this morning, by the way. Nothing serious, it's just a little bit of cold. So you might have to excuse me, like sniffing and clearing my throat and things like that. I'll try not to do it because it's not very professional. But sometimes it can't be helped. Anyway, this episode was recorded in 6 separate parts. It was supposed to be 5 separate parts, but the missus needed me for something while I was recording one part, so I had to split it into 2. Each part is approximately 20 to 40 minutes long, so it gives you an idea. In fact, I can tell you how long the overall video was before I sped it up. It was 3 hours, 14 minutes, 56 seconds, and 52 frames. For those of you that don't know, I record at 60 frames per second, so that gives you an idea. I mean, how many frames is that, do you reckon? Oof. I don't even want to work that out. I can't even be bothered to work that out. That's a lot of frames. Anyway. Technically, the video is split into 3 main parts, and I'm going to try and do the commentary in 3 main parts as well. However, because of the fact that, there's 6 bits of footage rather than 4 or 5 or however many there was originally meant to be, excuse me, there's me clearing my throat, you'll have to bear with me as I try and remember what happened where. This bit, though, I can tell you quite happily what's going on here. This is Denninghead DC Depot. It's built right next door to the Western Reaches South Depot that I built many moons ago. In fact, you can see a train moving in the background there. This is the depot for Gardcity Southwestern. Pretty much every single train that operates on the Gardcity Southwestern franchise will originate at this depot. It looks quite small, I hear you say. And yes, you would be right. I'm trying out some new designs where, effectively, this is a modular design. It looks really small right now, but it has the potential to grow. So every time we have more trains added, the depot itself can possibly be shuffled back slightly to allow more tracks to exist, or more tracks can just be added either side, and it will do the job just as well. The interesting thing about this design, and you will see this again later on in this episode, is the 2 tunneled lines in the center of the main approach. This is something new that I wanted to go for, because I didn't want the depots themselves to be shunted off to the sides, nor did I want there to be a big gap where tracks were going round the depots. So I actually decided to have the depots just be on top of the 2 main entry roads, and then have 2 or 3 roads either side, on each side, to allow trains to enter and leave in various different combinations. You'll also notice that this track here has been built to allow trains to leave in both directions, which is something that I've learned from many trialed and failed experiences, that it's good to have that operational flexibility. It's also quite true to life. Quite a lot of depots now, particularly metro depots around the world, do have the ability for trains to leave in either direction, because ultimately you do have trains starting at both ends of the line. Heavy rail is slightly different because you don't tend to have that. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And it is possible, in fact. Something else I've been considering is, say for example, you have a train that starts at Fort Flonwood Parkway, which you will see us do shortly, and travels all the way up to Gardcity St Mark. Every single day, the first journey of the day will be that. And that doesn't necessarily work. It kind of does in this context, I suppose, because commuters will be heading into the city, not out of the city. But that's not always the case with this. Sometimes I have trains that start in the city and head outwards first thing in the morning, and that's kind of counterintuitive for the commuter direction of travel. So what I was considering doing is having like a one-off service that runs every day that does the journey in reverse, and literally just having one train in the depot dedicated to doing the reverse journey first thing in the morning, just so that you have then got trains running in both directions from the get-go. That could be done by having just a little set of sidings and its own little depot. Doesn't necessarily have to be from the main depot. It would be cool if it was, but that's not always doable. But that's a little idea I had, so do let me know what you guys think about that, and if you think that's a worthy thing to do. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know whether that's just me being really like overthinking it too much, or whether that is like a genuine thing. Whilst I've got your attention here, I suppose I should talk a little bit more about what this episode, how it's going to be structured. So there's going to be this section where I basically tell you what I'm doing at the time. There will be sections where I'm not talking at all, and it'll just be music. And also, because technically this was supposed to be last week's episode, but at the time I hadn't finished recording, because the original plan was to do all 3 franchises in one episode. Now that this is a 3-hour video before I've sped it up, I'm kind of glad that I didn't go that route. Next week's episode will have the Southern and Southeastern franchises being completed. One of the problems I did have with this project was the fact that I was halfway through putting trains in and I suddenly had to reroute something or rebuild something or change the configuration of some platforms. It really was a trial and error, bearing in mind that, I mean, Fort Flonwood Central, which used to be Fort Flonwood Parkway, was built, I think, 2.5 years before Munfingford Paragon was rebuilt, so it was never the plan to have trains run from those 2 stations to each other. Now that is part of the plan. There was some rebuilding necessary in order to make that work. So that was something that obviously I hadn't anticipated when I started this, but I'm also very, very glad that I did get to do it and fix it, because now it works really, really well. So that's going to be part 1. Part 2 is going to be just general discussion about the network and how things are going. Also a little bit of a summary of the route overview series that's been on for the last, I think, is it 4 episodes I've done now? Pretty sure it's 4 episodes. And then part 3, because this is the first episode of the month, and we are the 10th of December, so I'm very, very late, so apologies that there wasn't a video last week, is going to be rail news, latest rail news. There isn't much, to be fair. The headline news is quite bleak as well, so I'm going to try and avoid most of that if I can, and talk about the more positive things, particularly because I really don't want this to turn into a political discussion again, but sometimes you can't really avoid that. But let's get on with part 1 first. So part 1 is literally what you're seeing on the screen right now. Now the footage doesn't actually look like it's going that fast right now. I can assure you it is actually 3 times faster than what I did when I was recording. So because I wasn't really knowing what I was doing when I was doing this, you can kind of see how it was a little bit tentative when I was doing all of this, which is fine. You know, that does happen. I'm not always, like, especially now, I'm not always willing to just dive into something and build it. I kind of want to make sure that it actually will work first, because the number of times I've had to go back and rebuild things because I haven't done it properly the first time, very, very frustrating. So that's part 1. Part 2 is the starting of services out of this depot. So this depot wasn't originally going to be built first. It wasn't in the plan at all, and originally I was going to use the Southeastern depot and have trains cross over at GSMA, and then I looked at the junction configuration and thought that's going to clog, and I'm getting very good at predicting that sort of thing now as well, because I'm pretty sure when I was doing the Northwestern configuration at Honingville, I had a feeling that something was going to clog, but then I forgot which part it was, and then sure enough, after I finished recording all of this video, I went up to Honingville to check something, and one HST had gone the wrong way and blocked 6 lines, and had just the whole thing, the Gardcity Great Northern, Northwestern, Network Central, and freight operations, and cross region in that area had all ground to a halt because of one rogue HST. So one thing that's made me do is be a lot more vigilant now about junction configurations and signalling, and not just saying, oh, I'll leave that till later, but actually fixing it now, which is one of the reasons why I keep jumping from pillar to post during this video, because I'm constantly thinking if I leave this, I'll forget about it. So I'm having to jump forwards and backwards trying to fix these things to actually get the damn things to work. So that's one thing I'm doing right here. Also, whilst I'm talking about this route, rolling stock. Originally, each route was going to have its own rolling stock. So, for example, the Southeastern Express services are already being operated by Class 480s, which are Class 4... One second, I do know the answer to this, but I've forgotten, because I'm good like that. It is... yes, I am checking, by the way, I'm cheating. Class 423, that's the one. 423 is 423_9-9, and I think that's it. The 423s and the 423. Oh, there is something else actually. It is the. Oh no, maybe it is just the -9. Basically, the 480 is an amalgamation of several different carriages and units and things like that. So the 423 is its own unit. I believe it's an express unit still, but I think it's like 4 or 5 carriages long. The 480 is a lot longer than that, because it's formed of... Oh, okay, yeah, I remember how it's done now. So the 480 is a 423 with several other carriages sort of tacked onto it. And it actually looks really cool. I've seen it. In fact, you'll see it in a second in M4J rail livery. And I think it looks really, really nifty. Fits the part perfectly. So that's what the stock was going to be on the Southeastern. And then we were just going to have like 455s and maybe 313s. More on the 313s in a second, because I know what some of you are already thinking. And I have some good news for you. So that was the plan there. And then the Southern was mainly just going to be commuter type trains. So again, 455s, 456s, maybe 465s and 6s as well. But I hadn't gone that far. And then Southwestern was going to be... again, 455s for the slow, and then 442s for the fast. That is basically what's happened. But I've goofed with some of my programming for the new GRF. So effectively, the 313 is now in the game. And not just a 313. You've got the 313-0s, 313-1s, and the 313-2s. I haven't tested them all, but effectively the 313-0 is the ones that we used on Great Northern. So they have dual voltage capabilities, but when they're operating on third rail, they're limited to 30 miles per hour. I haven't tested that functionality. It is in the code, so I'm assuming it works, but I haven't actually tested it. So don't get too upset if you do test it and it doesn't work. So that's step 1. Step 2 was the 313-1s, which are the ones used by Silverlink and Network Rail, and technically London Overground for a little bit as well, but there wasn't a London Overground livery because they remained in Silverlink livery. Those, I believe, were overhead electrification only, and there's no speed limiting on them at all. The 313-2s are the ones that are used by Southern, and they do have dual voltage capabilities still, as all the other units do. However, they have no pantographs. It is literally just third rail. Now, I've kind of botched it a little bit in that I haven't removed the pantographs. I think what a smart human would do at this point is go into the sprite and then have one with no pantographs and have that be the 313-2s. And I probably will do that in the future for the sake of realism. But just to try and test this and get it to work, I haven't done that. Likewise, there's probably like third rail shoes that appear in the pixel art that I could remove for the ones, but I haven't done that either. So that's fine. It took me a little bit of trial and error, but it's technically the first train I've ever coded by myself. I did have a little bit of help from the BR Trains team still, mainly as a soundboard actually, so I would just like put something in the chat, read through it again, and then sort of answer my own question. But they did come to my aid when I needed it, I think 2 or 3 times as well. So again, thank you to them. But it's encouraging because I now know how to do trains. So there are other trains that I've been looking at, like the 365s, for example. How the 365s aren't already in the set, by the way, I think is a criminal offence. But that will be something I'll be adding in the future as well. I think for that, I'll just take the 465s and add pantographs to them. And what else is missing? There's lots of freight stock that's missing, which I might have a little dabble in. And there are other things, but I can't think of them off the top of my head because I had a whole list of them somewhere and I can't remember what I did with it. But yeah, there are other trains that I would like to see added. I know that there are people working on the more modern stuff, but I'm sort of more interested in the old stuff right now and sort of completing the set at that end of things. So getting some more legacy tube stock in would be nice as well, like the 38 stock, the 56 stock, is it? That doesn't sound right. No, probably isn't. The basically, so the old tube stock with the doors at the ends of carriages, in the vestibule bits, which were technically just open balconies, but you know what I mean. And then like the old Northern Line stock, the old Bakerloo Line stock, the old Victoria Line stock, all the way up to like Jubilee Line, and then beyond to 2009. And we do have the current subsurface stock, S stock. I forgot the letter then. But we haven't got the A's, we haven't got the D's, we haven't got the C's. So it'd be nice to have those in, and then also all of the deep level tube trains as well. That's something I'd like to do in the future. I think that'll be. I mean, I'm saying this, it probably won't be, but I think it might be a bit easy to do the pixel art on a train that's literally half the height of all the others. But we'll see. So the reason I've goofed with the new GRF is when I added the liveries for M4J rail for the 423s and the 480 and the 455s, I completely forgot to add M4J rail to the description. So the liveries are in the game, you'll see me use them shortly, but I completely forgot to add them to the list, so I'm going to have to go back and add them to the list. So it's not game breaking or anything like that, it's just there are trains that have the M4J livery that you can't currently see has the M4J rail livery, even though once you've bought the train and try and refit it, the livery is there and does work. So that's just a schoolboy error really, that's a little hiccup, that's nothing, no biggie. Speaking of schoolboy errors and little hiccups, Monday's video was supposed to go live on Tuesday. I'm an idiot, because I uploaded it on Monday with 24 hours to go, and I was really proud of myself and I was patting myself on the back because it's the first time in over a month that I've actually uploaded a video a day early. And subliminally I just went and put the day's date that I was on, and then by the time I realised, I had a notification come through on my phone saying your video is premiering. I was like, what do you mean? It's supposed to be tomorrow. Oh shit, because I did it on the wrong day. So that was a dumb goof, but thankfully it hasn't affected viewing figures, because the viewing figures are still quite encouraging from that. And since I'm talking about that, I know I'm going from A to B to D to Z right now, just jumping all over the place, a bit like this video to be honest. But to go on to the topic of the route overview videos, I'm really happy with how well they're going actually. I'm trying out some new editing techniques with them, which I think is cool. I'm trying out some new things with the graphics and the animations and the captions, and also sort of creating a lore now for this network. It's all well and good having these stations and then saying, you know, oh, I built this station in 2017, but obviously I didn't build this station in 2017. This station was built by the such and such railway in 1856, something like that. And that's what I'm trying to look at now, is I'm not putting years to things, because the way this network has been evolved over time, like the network central is probably the newest main line on the route right now, and yet the history of it's supposed to have been built back in the 1800s, so you can kind of see how that doesn't add up. So I'm trying not to put years on things, like actual dates, but I am trying to make things look like they have a history to them. And that seems to be something that you guys are enjoying, the fact that there's a history behind these things now, and it's not just here's a station I built last week, but it's actually, you know, this station has evolved over the years. It used to have 6 platforms, now it has 12, that kind of thing. It's something I've seen a lot, and again, big credit to the series that have inspired me, Simply Railway and Dylan's Travel Reports. I've been watching a lot of their content recently, and that's basically the inspiration for the Route Overview series, was to take a fictional network and treat it like a real one, in that you do trip reports and the history of the route and things like that. They obviously go into a lot more meticulous detail than I do because they have to research actual rail routes, and they're very knowledgeable, by the way. They know certainly a lot more than I do about these things. So check them out. I might put their links in the description, actually. Not that they need my help to grow, but you know, might as well. It's the good thing to do. But yeah, if anyone was wondering, that was the inspiration. I know I'm saying a lot as well. Apologies. I nearly did it again then. So the there it is. Literally just did it again. Literally just did it again. It's really hard not to. And I only really care about it because someone pointed it out to me once. They said I said more ums and ahs in a video. This was a FIFA video like 6 years ago. I said more ums and ahs than I did actual words, is what they said. And it's kind of stuck in my mind. But yeah. The history of the network is something that I've been wanting to write down for a while as well. Mainly so that I know I did it again, I'm not even going to talk about it. Mainly so that I don't forget it, because it's nice to have a consistent history when you're working with something like this. Because again, when I'm doing streams, people might ask me a question about when was this built, or what's the history of this, and it will change it each and every time, which isn't very consistent. So being able to actually have a consistent backstory and have it all logged somewhere. At the moment it's only logged in videos, so I will have to eventually put it down on a spreadsheet, or PowerPoint, or just in a Word document, and then it's all like locked in as history. But the evolution of M4J rail is something that I've been wanting to do videos on for a while now as well. If anyone read my blog this week, which I think went up on Tuesday, I understand it's quite a long blog, but if you scroll down to the bottom, I do talk about my current running series, which ones are staying. Pretty much all of them are staying, and then also which ones are going to be joining the party. One of the ones that I talked about joining the party was a history of the M4J network series, which this isn't going to go the way of my Siege series, which is, by the way, still technically in the pipeline. I'm just trying to actually I'll come back to that in a second, but the history of the M4J network series is in the works. I've already written the script for the first episode. I'm just refining it as we speak, and it's literally going to go from talking about my history with Transport Tycoon Deluxe, which is what episode 1 is all about, the history of Transport Tycoon itself and how it came to be OpenTTD, and then from there onwards it's going to talk more about my relationship with the game, particularly Transport Tycoon. It was the game I played the most as a child. Some people might think it'd be something like Railroad Tycoon or even Roller Coaster Tycoon, but no, Transport Tycoon genuinely is the game I played the most as a kid growing up. Even more than Tomb Raider and Crash Bandicoot, believe it or not. So that's part 1, and then part 2 is going to be part 1 is the history of the game. Part 2 is my history with the game, so how I came about it, how I started playing it, how good I got at it, things like that. Part 3 is then going to be sort of the transition into OpenTTD and the first attempts at creating a series on it. Part 4 is then going to be, this is all not set in stone yet, by the way, so this might be subject to change, but part 4 is going to be the first Majeffries network series and map, because I still have the save, so there'll be like screenshots and little clips of that working. I'm going to cringe when I look back at some of the things I built, which again is actually one of the reasons why this series exists. Part 5 is then going to be the second map and lessons learned from the first map, and then part 6 is going to be the map that we're on now, technically, but in the Majeffries network era. And then if there is a part 7, it will be the current map and how that came to be. Now, as I said, that's still up in the air right now, because I feel like if each episode's going to sort of be 15-20 minutes, I'm not going to be able to fit the entire history of this iteration of the map into 20 minutes. That's just impossible. So it might end up being like part 7A, part 7B, or it might literally just be part 7 is the first episode of this, part 8 is the second, and so on. But yeah, to go back to what I was talking about with the Siege series, the reason the Siege series never happened, or hasn't happened yet, is I wasn't really confident in my editing abilities or my script writing abilities. And that's not to say I don't think I can write a script, because I've written plenty of scripts in the past. It's more the fact that I didn't really know the narrative of the video, how I wanted it to start, how I wanted it to end, and all the bits in the middle, like the tone of the video. And one thing that the route overview series has allowed me to do is actually experiment with the idea of creating a story out of essentially nothing. So this is just a route, a network, as you will, that I've built on OpenTTD. It doesn't really mean anything. But as soon as you start saying this station was built in, the first era of railways, it's been rebuilt several times over the years. I'm literally making this up on the spot, by the way. Don't expect to see this bit in a video. But at that point, you start turning it into a story, and it has a little bit more meaning to it. And it's the same with my Siege videos. So I could just put some clips up of me playing Siege, which, that could work. But the whole point of that series was to sort of chronicle and document me going from being an absolute novice at the game to being half decent. And I already think I have matches where I'm half decent, if I do say so myself. But I'm definitely not at the stage yet where I can try out ranked matches, for example. So there's work to do still, but I feel a bit more confident now in actually making a video that explains that, because to begin with, as I said, I wrote the script for the first episode a long time ago, and I had it all ready to go, but I never recorded it because I didn't really know, was I recording audio and then matching the footage to it, or was I just taking the footage and then trying to talk over it? I wasn't really sure. Now that I've had a go at sort of creating captions to fit certain points of videos, I feel like I could do it that way, but with my voice instead of with a caption card, if that makes sense. So that is something that will be in the works again in the not too distant future. What I might do first, though, is the history of the M4J network series first, because that's a good example of I already know how I want that to be. It's just a case of making the script match what I've got in my mind's eye. So that's going to be the next sort of part, the next project, should we say, that's going to be worked on. If you do want more information on all of this, by the way, my blog is a very, very good place to start. m4jmedia.com/updates, and it should be the one at the tippy top. Actually, not the tippy top, because that's the code of conduct, but it should be the one at the top of the list of all the blogs. I talk a lot about my OBS issues as well, some of which you will see during this video, because I still had the dreaded media encoder overload. But it's kind of a twofer blog. The first part is OBS and my issues with it and how I've sort of fixed it. In case there are other people out there who use OBS and have a similar issue, feel free to check that out. It may or may not help you. And then the second part is talking more about my channel again and current series and which ones are staying, which ones are going. None are going, spoiler alert. But also which ones are going to be joining, and also how my thoughts and feelings about the channel has changed slightly over this year in general, really. And I will be doing an end-of-year roundup as well, which might not make for that much fun reading, but, some people might be interested and might want to read it. A lot's happened this year, as you may or may not know, in and outside of the real world as well. A lot of things have happened, so it's probably worth talking about as a form of therapy more than anything. And yeah, there might be some ideas sort of pitched there as well. And it would be nice, by the way. I don't know how possible this is, because I haven't done it myself on a blog of this type, but if you have the ability to comment and like the blogs, please do so, because again, just like a video, it really helps out. And the idea of these blogs really is to create that community spirit still and get people involved. So if I've said something in this blog that about OBS that isn't actually true, please feel free to correct me, because if I am missing something very obvious that would make OBS work for me a lot better, please do tell me, because that's actually valuable information. Or if you just want to pitch ideas for new series next year, because I am looking for ideas for next year. There are games that are out currently that I'm currently looking into. 2 I have named. One is a returning game, but one is well, actually both are returning games, to be pedantic about it. But one of them hasn't been on the channel for 5 years, I think, something like that. So that's a returnee, and then Planet Coaster is the other one. So I want to get back into Planet Coaster and actually start working on Global Ventures again. I don't really know why I stopped, to be honest. I'll probably talk about that more in that video. But yeah, anyway, I'm not really talking about trains right now, or railways. I could do some rail news in a little bit. What I might do for now, though, because I am still building this depot here, which is the Southern Gardcity Southern depot. This branches off the line between Buntbourne and Munfingford. And again, connections in both directions. Most of the Gardcity Southern trains actually start in Munfingford, and then either go up to Gardcity or go across to Buntbourne, not Buntbourne, sorry, Cadingbury, or Tomwin Funston, or think we have one that goes from Fort Flonwood, but I can't remember. I actually can't remember. But yeah, there will be... all three of these franchises have lots of crossovers. There's no real boundaries between them. So if anyone wishes to become a patron and take over these franchises, or one of these franchises, sort of bear in mind the fact that there will be other franchises encroaching on your territory, as it were. It's nothing to worry about. You're not going to lose services or anything like that. All the services that you have when you claim the franchise will be yours. And if you want to add additional ones, so long as it's not like really taking the mickey, then I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be allowed to. It's mainly because right now these are all quite direct routes. They go from A to B. Eventually I will start adding some more branch lines that connect all of these up through some of the other towns and cities along the way. And at that point, each franchise will have its own branch line that it operates. You know, like how Southwest Trains, or Southwestern Railway, sorry, operates the Chesington branch and the Windsor branch and things like that. And the Reading branch, although GWR operate down there as well. It'll be that kind of thing. So there'll be lots of like little spur branch lines that just run off and terminate at little towns along the way. And those will be more franchise specific. But right now, at least, you know, you will be sharing the main lines. But again, I mean, I find that quite fun to try and have to fit all these different services around each other. It's a nice challenge to have, let's put it that way. Particularly when I was doing the Southwestern and I got down to Charwood, trying to like thread that in between the GWR services. It's actually worked out quite well. I think one train leaves just as the next one arrives. So I'm quite happy with that myself. But yeah. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit. I'm going to let the music take over. And then when we come back in a little bit, probably like 10 minutes, something like that, I'll start going over rail news. And I'll start talking about future ideas for the M4J network. So I'll see you guys in just a second. So I'm back, and now we've got some trains out on the line. So I first thing I did was fix the southeastern trains because they kept getting lost. In fact, I think they still get lost throughout this video, which is kind of annoying. In fact, I've paused the game, so yeah, this is the point where they got lost. I don't know what happened. I know I did some rejigging of some of the junctions by the southeastern depot, but they just seem to completely take leave of all of their senses and start going off in random directions. So I had to do some rejigging there, but it does work again now. I've tested it several times since, and it does indeed work. We are also starting to get some suburban commuter trains out on the Southwestern, which is very, very exciting. So first and foremost, we have this train here, which is an all-stopper between Gardcity St Mark and Fort Flonwood Central. Technically, it's Fort Flonwood Central to Gardcity St Mark. And this is kind of the ones where I was talking about where it doesn't technically need to be inverted, because this is the right direction of travel. And the last train at night will go from Gardcity St Mark back out to Fort Flonwood, which again is kind of the right direction of travel. The reason I decided to do it this way and not have all trains start and end at Gardcity St Mark, in fact you'll see it in a second when we actually reach there, there aren't many platforms on this side of the station, and this side of the station is meant to serve southwestern and southern trains. So I decided, took a very long think about it, held several board meetings, wrote some proposals, and the idea was to have it be the other way around. So start at Fort Flonwood and then go out to Gardcity and back. There is more platforms at Fort Flonwood, plus we can split them. So the all-stopper starts at Fort Flonwood Central. The more infrequent stopper actually starts at Fort Flonwood Parkway. So just by having those two stations so close together, you also sort of delegate platforms. And yeah, I don't really know what I'm saying anymore. Here we are at Fort Flonwood. Oh, for God's sake! Here we are at Gardcity. Ah, why did I know I was going to mess it up? It's because in the back of my mind, I wanted to talk about the new connection that we built a couple of weeks ago, because that's the whole point of that connection, was to be able to run trains in and out of this section of Gardcity St Mark. So originally, the connection from Gardcity Rinston Airport up to GSMA was via the line you can just about see in the bottom of the screen there on the left-hand side. But that only really works for through trains through GSMA, and that is still used by through trains. It will be used by Gardcity Connect and Gardcity Express services, and perhaps maybe one, maybe Gardcity Southern service that will continue up to Flame Junction. That is the plan, as well as having overground trains and underground trains running on that branch. I also wanted to have a train that ran straight through. It should be Gardcity Connect really, but there's no way of getting a train from the Gardcity Connect depot to Flame Junction to run on that set of lines. So I might just do it as a southern train instead, or a southwestern train, and have it as an all-stopper that way. We will see. But that's part of the problem that we had, was getting trains into the right section of GSMA. So that new link that we built between the airport and Shoreham Junction has fixed that very, very nicely, and made it possible. And because that's now technically the main line, and the line joining from the north is the branch line, and I'm saying those in inverted commas, it's kind of changed the way that Gardcity Rinston Airport Station actually works, which is kind of interesting as well. I had to do some re-signalling in order for that to work, but I'm quite happy with the result. I think it works very, very well. So yeah, we've got the new branch, technically. Even though it's the main line, I'm still going to refer to it as the branch. We've got the new branch now that these trains will be running on, in and out of GSMA via Shoreham Junction. Some trains stop, some trains don't. I also have a train that goes from Rinston Airport up towards Sibbertsham and in that way, which is also a southwestern train, and that actually uses the overground branch from Shoreham Junction to GSMA, and it stops at Funingley North. So again, this operational flexibility is something that I've always been fascinated by with South London Rail, how they've managed to create this network. It's not even a network, it's just this huge web of rail where different trains can run. Like you can run from Victoria to Dartford, say, I think 3 or 4 different ways, and I really want that in the network. And George mentioned this in the comments. Actually, was it in the comments or was it on Discord? I can't remember. But basically, how this looks like South. Oh, I think it was in the chat on Monday actually. How it's going to be like South London. And yes, that's exactly the inspiration, was to try and make it like South London. It's an area of London that I don't know particularly well, geographically speaking, but from the rail point of view, I do know it quite well. I've looked at maps, I've looked at the history of it, satellite views, things like that, and it's something that, as I said, I've always been fascinated by. Particularly now, because when I was younger and I used to think I was a train enthusiast, I wasn't that interested, but now I consider myself more as a rail enthusiast. It is really, really interesting how all these different lines, because they were all built by different companies back in the day, and they were all built by competing companies, and that's why you have the quarry lines on the Brighton main line running exactly parallel to, but doing something completely different to what the slow trains do. So the quarry lines are the fast. I think both sets of lines are the quarry lines, but the fast lines at one point diverge from the slow lines, and they sort of run parallel for a few miles, but they're like a mile apart almost. I've got my numbers wrong, I know, because I'm not that. As I said, geographically speaking, I don't know South London very well. But that's because they were built by different companies, and they were built by competing companies. So Redhill Station was one of those areas where battle was fought, basically, between these two, in fact 3 different rail companies at one point. And that's why Redhill has this sort of weird layout, because eventually a compromise was reached, but then that compromise was breached, and then the battle started again. So the quarry lines completely avoid Redhill as part of, wanting. In fact, I think Redhill Station came after. I've got my history messed up. I really should have these things written down if I'm talking about real life history. I can make it up if it's M4J network history, but this is a bit different. That's something I always wondered, is why do these lines run right next to each other but so far apart, if that makes sense. It's because they were built by competing companies trying to one-up each other. And now when they were absorbed by the Southern, they kind of had to make the most out of them, and then British Rail had to do the same. And now they've been privatised. It actually turns out to be quite a convenient thing these days, because you can run the faster trains on the quarry lines, and they get from London out to the south a little bit quicker. But there's a lot of that around London. There's a lot of parallel tracks that were actually built by competing companies, and that's why some stop at certain stations and some don't. Because, I mean, these days you could easily rebuild it to make that happen, but again, it's a matter of convenience, that what competing companies were doing 100 years ago is actually benefiting us now, because you can have fast services and slow services use the same lines, and it works out really, really well. So that's something, really long roundabout way of saying that's something I do actually want to do on the M4J network. So right now we have, between Rinston and Fort Flonwood, we have these 2 main lines, but why not build some branch lines that connect them up in the middle? Why not build some lines that go from, say, Rinston down to Buntbourne, and like completely cut out going through Fort Flonwood, and then you've got a whole new range of lines that these trains can operate on. There are 10 new services that I add in this video, running from Fort Flonwood and Gardcity to places like Munfingford, Buntbourne, Cadingbury, Charwood. But I could easily double this. If I actually build some new main lines and branch lines, I could easily double this. And there are some huge gaps. If I was to look at George's map again, I could see where the huge gaps are on the network and start planning to build lines between them. And this is something I was thinking about the other day. I was actually going to do rail news first, but I'm going to put that to one side because I might as well talk about the future of the M4J network. After I finished the Network Central, and after I finished the East Coast main line, I started looking at what other lines are there that actually need to be built. And right now, I think the only main line that is yet to be completed is the one southeast from Queen City. Because I think the one, actually there's the one northeast from Queen City as well, but it's basically that area in and around Queen City. Once that's done, what's there to do, was what I was thinking. In terms of new lines, what is there to do? We've still got lots of other lines that need to be brought up to spec before trains can start running on them, but what else was there to do? And the answer is not a lot, really. Until now, because now I've got this idea to build these new suburban branch lines, not just here but also up at Gardcity, because there is that line from Gardcity as well that hasn't been built yet. And that's it now, really, is just building connecting lines to join some more of these main lines up. There aren't any major new main lines that I want to build right now. That could change. If you have any suggestions, feel free to comment down below. And there will be, I think after next week, once the last franchise is up and running, I will be putting a new version of the map up on my website for download, along with the first official release of the M4J network add-on to BR trains. And I think that's what I'm going to refer to it as, because the 313s, I might make a version with the 313s without the M4J rail livery, because that's a new train that I've added. Plus there are some trains that have been added by other members of the BR Trains team. I might ask them if I can borrow their sprites and their code to put in as well. Although I might let them do that side of things. I don't know. I'll have to have a chat with them about it. But basically, yeah, the idea at that point will be to release it as a new GRF so that people can download it and play it, and to have the option of whether you want the M4J version or not. Because I don't see the harm of having the M4J rail livery in case people do want to use it, but I don't know. There's always people up in arms about something, and I mean, they're referred to as rivet counters, but I'd like to call them realists myself. People who don't want fake liveries in the game, essentially. And some people might sneer at that. I think it's fine. If you don't want the livery in the game, that's totally acceptable. Don't be mean about it, mind, but I think that's, it's perfectly acceptable to think like that. So I might do a version with and without the M4J rail livery, because I think I can just comment it out in the code and release it as its own separate UGRF. We'll see. We will see. But yeah, that's basically the plan. That is the roadmap moving forward. If there's anything you'd like to see added, obviously rail might be coming to an end in terms of new construction projects, but road is still very much a thing on the network, as is air, as is sea. And again, if you read my my blog, I do talk about other forms of transport being added to the network in the not too distant future. And I literally mean within the next few weeks, because I think over Christmas New Year period I'm not going to be doing heavy episodes like this, so I'm going to be taking it a little bit more easy. So also from doing the route overviews, we keep stopping at stations like Warnbridge Airport, for example, and it says currently there are no flights operating, which isn't technically true, because you can get a flight from there to Great Winfield. But there's a lot of airports where there are no trains running, so I think it's time we started getting some trains running. Trains, sorry. There's no planes running, so I think it's time that we've got some planes running, and that will be one of the... In fact, I think that will be the next priority, is going around the map, seeing what airports are currently operating, and whether we can add more airports and then flights. So I'd like to have a service, or a series of services that link Gardcity and Gardcity via air. And I believe it's possible. If I was to build an airport roughly central in the map, so somewhere near Dendstone, and I believe there is one not far from Dendstone, Waterside Airport might be roughly level, but slightly to the west. If I could get a flight that runs from, say, Great Winfield, or Rinston, because Rinston's the most southerly, to Waterside, and then a flight from Gardcity to Waterside, then it's not going to be a single flight. You will have to change, but there are lots of flights in real life where you have to transfer, so that does make sense. That would work quite nicely then. And then you could have this big hub airport in the middle of the map, where if you're an Excelsior patron, for example, that would be your airport, and the whole area around it pretty much would be your airport. So that's something that is worth looking into in the future. I've also had this idea as well of, if you become a franchisee for air and you are given an airport, you're allowed to customize it. So you can't rebuild the airport itself, but you can add eye candy around it to make it look nicer, and that would be in your domain. So you'd have to raise the money to do it. So if your airport is built in the middle of a city, for example, that's going to be slightly more challenging. But if your airport is built outside of a city, then the sky is your limit, as it were. So that's pretty much it for the M4J network news. We've got a little bit of time left. We've got 20 odd minutes. So I'm going to talk to you about latest rail news in the real world. So let's start with Metro news, because I've got that page open right now. So on the London Underground, Bank Station tunnelling has been complete. So this is something I always forget is happening. I don't know how many of you guys are forgetting it's happening as well. Bank Station is getting a major rebuild on the Northern Line. A whole new tunnel has been built, and a whole new platform is being built. Not to add an additional platform, but to replace the current southbound, I believe it is. Yeah, a new southbound running line and a new southbound platform. So the current southbound platform is going to be turned into a like a foyer kind of area, convergence point, with new lifts and escalators and things like that. And then there's going to be a new southbound, kind of like what they did with is it Angel where they did it, where you can kind of see where the old platform used to be, because it used to be an island platform like in Clapham, and now it's been rebuilt. I like that. I think it's awesome that they're sort of doing these projects, because everyone's sort of distracted by Crossrail and the Northern Line extension. But yeah, Bank Station is getting a major rebuild as well. In fact, I think the Northern Line extension is the reason why Bank Station needed upgrading. But it's not just the Northern Line platforms. There's also new walkways being built. There's a new entrance being built on Cannon Street. There's also a new link between the Northern Line and the Docklands Light Railway. And I believe there's also a new there's also a new link tunnel between the Northern and Central lines as well. So it's a pretty mammoth project, and the tunnelling work has been complete. So that's a big milestone. So hopefully, I think 2022. Yeah, Bank Station is one of the busiest interchanges, with the work increasing the size of the station by 40% when finished in 2022. So that's around about the time that the extension opens as well, I believe. So it kind of works out quite nicely. Heading north, there's new trams in Manchester. 27 new trams. They are of the same type as the existing trams, so there's going to be no confusion there. There are over 120 trams now up in Manchester, which is an insane amount. But the fact that they're building new lines pretty much every year at the moment, you can see why they needed more. I really like the Metrolink network. I think it's a perfect example of how to do it properly. I wasn't a big fan of them taking over old railways originally, but considering it's replacing rail with rail, it's not like what they did in Cambridge, where they ripped up the rail and put down a guided busway, and now realise that they're trying to rebuild the rail and there's a guided busway in the way. I still think that's so stupid. Never ever build over an old rail route like that. Never. Leave it open. The Isle of Wight, for example, all the old rail routes you can pretty much walk along. They still exist. I think there's one or two areas. Newport, for example, they've built over the old Newport station, but that you kind of understand because there was nowhere else to build. But don't build over a rail route, particularly with a bus. I mean, who wants a smelly bus when they can get on a nice, clean train? Anyway, that's my personal bias. So yeah, Manchester is growing significantly in terms of the trams and also the rail, because they are expanding the rail system up there as well, quadrupling tracks and things like that. Sorry if you can hear my page turning, by the way. I'm going to try and do it a little bit quieter. Around the world, I tend not to read stuff around the world, to be honest, because a lot of it is kind of like rail lines closing down and things like that. For example, timetable change reduces the diesel variety on German routes, so it's like the beginning of the end, and it sounds quite somber. However, multiple metro openings all over the world. Pakistan's first metro system in Lahore began in October this year. There are also new lines opening in China alone. There are new lines opening in Chengdu, Shenzhen, and is it Wuxi? I'm really bad at pronunciation, it turns out. There's also new lines in Copenhagen, Warsaw, and Sofia. Istanbul has the first section of the driverless line M7. Began in October as well. More lines in Turkey. Oh, some have been delayed, some have been postponed, I think I'm getting here. Minsk, the first section of the third cross-city line of the Minsk Metro was open in November. And extensions are due to open in December in Berlin and Paris. I made a meal of that, didn't I? But yeah, there's lots of new stuff coming. Metro-wise, which is awesome. There's also, which I kind of knew about, but found out more about it recently, there's a light rail link being built in Honolulu, of all places. And boy, are they proud of it. It's the first ever light rail system in Hawaii. And every time I go on YouTube now, I see video recommendations to watch it, which I think is really awesome. To see the progress. Most of it's being built on elevated sections. Some of it is, I believe, underground, and some of it is at grade. And it's very, very impressive. The new stations, for example, new trains as well, are also very impressive. It's going to be awesome. Besides that, this is a little bit of rail news, but it's mostly air news. There's an airport in Berlin called Berlin-Brandenburg. It was meant to open 10 years ago. It opened this year on October 31st. Halloween. I suppose because the airport was an absolute nightmare. Makes sense to open it on Halloween. The station underneath it has been ready for about 6 years. They were running trial trains to it. In fact, I think they were running the German equivalent of parliamentary trains to it just to justify its existence for the last few years. But the station is now finally serving the airport. The airport itself is finally open. A 15-kilometre loop line via the new airport station built beneath the new terminal is served by regional and intercity trains. The S-Bahn is also being extended, and I believe there are platforms, for the U-Bahn as well, that will be brought into use later. That's a real interesting story. If you want to see how to screw up an engineering project, go read about Berlin Brandenburg Airport. I guarantee you it's fascinating and jaw-dropping at the same time. It's a real... I can't say the word I want to say because it's a very bad swear word, but they absolutely ballsed it up. Absolutely ballsed it up. In terms of infrastructure news here in the UK, there have been EMU sidings built at Kettering on the Midland Main Line, ready for the Class 360s to arrive on East Midlands Rail. I know I said in the past that I think companies should use old trains before they use new trains or buy new trains, and I stand by that statement. However, I hate the Class 360s. They are ugly, ugly, ugly trains, and it kind of upsets me that one of my local stations is going to be having those monstrosities running through them. But hey ho, it is what it is. It is nice to see that they are reusing old trains though. I still think that there's potential for the networkers, the 365s, to operate on the Midland Main Line. I know they have got they need to use shorter carriages than most main lines because of tighter curves, something like that. I remember reading that, but because they're doing a lot of straightening projects now, like at Market Harbour for example, that might not even be an issue in the future. So that's one bit of news here in the UK. There's a lot of like track replacements and train derailments and things like that, which aren't particularly interesting. The South Wales Metro network is continuing to expand. Electrification work on the Valleys line is now underway. That's an interesting... sorry, the Core Valleys line. Core Valleys network. What am I reading? Core Valleys network. I'm going to say that because that's what it refers to it as here. That's a really interesting project as well, because they're going to have electrified trains running in and out of Cardiff Central, but they're also going to have tram trains running through Cardiff itself, like the city centre. So that's something very interesting to sort of keep up with, as and when you can. What else? Step-free access at Canterbury East. That's good. And that's about it really for the infrastructure. There isn't that much, like as I said, it's mostly like blockades and like a new bridge might have opened and things like that, but that's not really a huge thing to write home about. In terms of rolling stock though, there's quite a few things happening. The Class 769s for Transport for Wales have entered service. Those are the old 319s that have been turned into flex units. Those are now in operation. There are also new sidings ready. I think I just read that actually, but they've got it here. Oh no, this is a... No, why have they got the same story twice? I don't know. That doesn't make sense. The Orion, talking about the 319s, the Orion Parcels Bimode unit as well, which is another 319 that's been converted into parcel carrying trains. I've talked about this before because their livery is so nice. It's a really nice like dark blue with stars on. It's awesome. That's now, I think it's being moved ready for its testing. That seems to be what I'm reading here. But I like that idea as well of reusing old trains for parcels. I really don't understand why in 2020 we insist on having everything transported by road when you've got trains that can go faster, can carry more, and do it more efficiently as well, because trains do break down, but they don't like... There isn't like a bang clatter clatter and then you have to pull over to the side of the road and wait for the AA to come out. So I really like the idea of transporting parcels, particularly via rail, especially in the age of Amazon and companies like that, where everything's done by mail order. You want an efficient network all around the country, not just in key distribution centres. And I think that is one area where road doesn't work, is if you live... Say if you live in the far north of England, or even in Scotland, and your parcel's being distributed from a warehouse in London, by road it will take hours to get to you. Whereas by rail, I mean, it might have to be done at certain times of day, but it's a lot cheaper and a lot more efficient to just run a train directly from London to Glasgow with your package on. You know, it just makes sense. At least it does for me. So the current GWR Class 387 EMUs, they're the Electrostars. They've been renovated, or some of them have been renovated. 12 of them? Yeah, 12 units have been renovated, ready for Heathrow Express services. They've also undertaken ETCS testing, so the signalling system that allows them to run through the tunnels to Heathrow, particularly Terminal 5. That's good to see as well, because I know the Electrostars and the Aventras are very similar in that they were both built by Bombardier. They have similar software, particularly the 345s have very similar software to the Electrostars. So it shouldn't be that big a deal to get them working, because the 345s do now run to Heathrow, so the 387s should be quite easy to get. I mean, I say this like I know, but I don't know for certain, but in theory it should be quite easy. Former Grand Central Mark IVs in storage. This is a sad story. The abandoned Grand Central Blackpool North to London Euston service. They've stored the old trains because they abandoned the service, which because of COVID-19 it wasn't viable to do. Grand Central itself at the moment and Hull trains have ceased services again, whilst well, they did it during the second lockdown. I believe they're back up and running now, but because we're getting close to Christmas, it might not be operational at all right now until the end of the year. It's really unfortunate that companies like that get hit, and because of the nature of the company, it's open access, it's not a franchise, they don't get any government support. I kind of feel like that's a little bit short-sighted, because of all these things you would think that the open access ones would be the ones most susceptible to going under. So I think they need it more, but hey ho. My least favourite bit of news, the East Midlands Railway fleet of, where's the number? 810s. First of all, why are they the 810s? Are they actually that different from the 801s and the 800s and the 802s and the 803s and the 805s? Are they actually different? Do they need a new number? I don't think they do. I think we're wasting stock numbers right now. Every time it gets painted a new colour, we give it a new stock number. Why not just put like 803-1, 803-0 and have that be the distinguishing factor? Because there aren't hundreds of them. There's no need to have hundreds of them. Anyway, they're called the Auroras, which, what does that mean? What does that mean? At least with Azuma, you can kind of say it means, was it Far East, I think it means in Japanese? And they run on the East Coast main line, and there's also, Azuma has like a meaning of speed as well, I believe they said in the press release. And it made sense. Like, it's not my favourite word to say, but it kind of makes sense given the company that operates it and where the location is and things like that. And then you've got things like Arterio, which just sounds like a medical procedure. Now you've got things like Aurora, which doesn't mean anything. These trains run between St Pancras, Leicester, Nottingham, Derby and Sheffield. Which one of those is Aurora supposed to apply to? It's named after the Roman goddess of the dawn. Do these trains only run in the mornings or something? I don't understand. Can someone explain to me, please, how Aurora is an appropriate name for any train, never mind these ones. And I think that's it really for the rail news, to be honest. I know I ended on a rant there. I like to have a rant every now and then, it makes me feel better. There are old pacer units becoming things like school libraries and meeting halls and things like that. There are also some that are now part of heritage movements, which I think is awesome. And one other thing actually that I read to do with cross country, which it feels like a step in the right direction, but it almost feels like a mini step in the right direction. There's currently plans to take Turbostars from West Midlands Rail, I believe it is, and remove the centre carriage of the 3-carriage units and take them to cross country and turn their 3-carriage Turbostars and 2 cars, I think, Turbostars, into 3/4 car Turbostars, which sounds good. However, there are still lots of HSTs that need a home, and I think cross country could provide a good home for them. There was talk last month about cross country taking on 2 additional power cars, and yep, you didn't hear me wrong there. 2. No plans for carriages, by the way, just 2 additional power cars. So, you know, capacity is still going to be a meh. That's point 1. Point 2, as I've said last time, or a few episodes ago now actually, the networkers could work well on electrified routes, for example from Edinburgh down to somewhere like, trying to think. I don't think they can get to Norwich because I think it's unelectrified. But you know what I mean. On the electrified routes that Cross Country currently serves, there is scope there for things like networkers. Why not use these old trains? You will see this on the M4J network, by the way. You've already seen it in Northwestern. I've just taken any unit that I had available, or made it look like I've taken any unit that I had available, and that's what operates the services. There's no consistency on routes like that, and it's not me shafting people in the north, by the way, although there's a little bit of satire to do with that. It's more the fact that I want my network to look like a lot of it is sort of improvised in the moment, like this train's available, we'll run this one. And that's what I think. We shouldn't do it as shabbily as that here in the UK, but I think we've got too many sidings full of trains right now, and too many companies who don't have enough trains to run services. Now I know there's things like route clearances, and I know there's things like weight restrictions, but if there's a train that can pass all of that criteria that is currently sitting rusting in a siding, meanwhile there's a company that needs a train like that doesn't have the either the resources or the know-how to actually get them, why not put those two things together? The DFT own the 365s right now. It's part of this I'm trying to remember the arrangement that happened, but there was something that happened which meant that the 365s passed into the hands of the DFT. So they should be forcing those onto franchise holders right now and saying, we own these trains that we're not using right now. They're literally sitting in sidings at Ely and Long Marston and places like that, just rotting. And we're in charge of your franchise awards. So why don't we come to some arrangement where you use these trains and we perhaps negotiate a slightly lower deal on your franchise agreement? That sounds like a perfect mix, really, of getting the best of both worlds. We get trains running on these lines, and the DFT gets a little bit of money back because they're not having to store these trains. To me, it just makes sense. Just makes sense. And yet, for some reason, it's not happening. And I really don't get why. It's really, really confusing to me. And I'll talk about this a lot throughout this series, and I will keep talking about this until I kind of get the answer as to why we're not doing this. And you know, I'll make examples of it here on the M4J network. I've got old trains right now sitting in depots that aren't being used. The plan is to use them on lines around the network. I will look to see which depots are full of trains and which depots need trains, and I'll make the two sort of marry up and make sure that those trains get transferred to the new depot. And you know, when more people claim franchises, the first thing I'll ask them is, do you want new trains or would you like to inherit trains? And according to what their answer is how I'll act. Obviously, we're not doing financial arrangements apart from Patreon, so there's not going to be anything like that going on. But I kind of want to encourage it on my network first, and then try and encourage it on the real life network second, because that makes sense to me. I have more control over the M4J network as well, believe it or not. So that's kind of it's the thing that's been bugging me the most over the last few months. Is even now I see things about companies, they need like 2 extra trains to run a service, and they've been issuing letters to tender. I was like, well, no, don't. You've got trains sitting around that could be used. Some of them are old, some of them might need a little bit of refurb, sure. But I still think the HSTs are perfectly capable of operating it on the main line in the UK, and yet they've all been withdrawn, mainly because of the stigma of they're 40, 50 years old now. But if you take the D trains prove this. If you take a train that's 40 years old and you replace all of the core components and just leave the body shell, you got a new train. What's the philosophical question? I can't remember. Is it the Theseus question? Something like that. The Theseus, where you have a ship where if you replace every component of the ship, but then rebuild the ship using the replaced components, which ship is the original? Is it the one that you've slowly replaced the parts of, or is it the one that you've built out of the replaced parts? To me, that's the thing. Of these HSTs aren't actually 40 years old anymore. Most of them are 5-6 years old when you actually break it down and look at the components. The engines, they were added, was it 10 years ago, through much controversy. Which part of the 15 to 20 year old train are we not liking anymore because we think it's 40 years old? The body shell, that's about it. Sometimes the wheel sets too. Maybe a brush motor here or there. The rest of it is new or newer than we all think. But because it's it's got this stigma of being old. It therefore has to be thrown away. On that logic, why don't we start knocking down cathedrals and churches because they're old? Or why don't we start breaking down museums because they're old? You know, the logic to me doesn't add up. Why don't we cherish these things as being old and actually continue to use them? We don't knock down a bridge because it becomes 100 years old. We refurb it and we renovate it and we protect it. I think we should start doing something like that with our trains as well. I don't know how viable that would be, but we'll see. And I don't have anything against religion, by the way. I just use cathedrals because it's the first old building I could think of. But yeah, I think that's the conversation that needs to be had a lot more now, is what is our problem with old rolling stock? As these travel report videos that I've been watching prove, nothing is wrong with these old trains. They work very, very well. You give them a little bit of paint and a tidy up here and there, and you can create a very nice budget rail service that could operate around most of mainland Europe, and you can charge people peanuts to use it because it costs you next to nothing to run it. And that's why you have things like I've forgotten the names of the companies now. That's not very good, is it? You've got the budget. Is it WeGo? I think it's WeGo. The TGV, the budget TGV that SNCF operate, and then you've also got, is it Yes Rail or Yes something that Thales have, and then there's other countries now that are starting their own services because they use these cheap trains that no one else wanted. They pick them up, they spend a couple of million refurbing the carriages, they get an old loco or a new loco that's compatible, couple it to the front, done. We could do that with HSTs. If you want to run an open access operation here in the UK, use an HST or a networker. They're old trains, no one's using them right now, they're going to be cheap and cheerful, and they're efficient, and they run well, and they're fast. That's the other thing, they can run 120 miles an hour. And most of them, particularly the HSTs, can operate on several different mainline routes as well. So there we go. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up here, guys, because I am running out of time. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. It has been a long one this week. You can kind of see why there wasn't an episode last week now. Although, again, I do apologise for that. Splitting this up into two, and yes, this has been split up into two, believe it or not, was a good idea still. Next week, we'll see the conclusion of this project, including the Southern and... I said Southern really weirdly there. Southern and Southeastern franchises. And then a little bit more of a chat about what comes next, rail-wise. Because I have plans for the next episode, but I need to know what you guys want to see next in terms of rail. So until then, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. And of course, if you're enjoying the series, drop some comments down below with ideas for future episodes. Also, head over to the Reddit and the Discord and leave your suggestions there as well. Besides all that, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you have already subscribed to the channel, thank you guys for your continued support. And until next time, I will see you soon.